Hey guys, tonight we are not simply talking about Attack on Titan. We are talking about the boy who became its soul, a character praised as a hero by some, condemned as a monster by others, and remembered by everyone who witnessed his story. Eren Yeager. And before we begin, I want to ask you something. Do you believe Eren was right or wrong? And if you were in his position, what would you have done instead? Also, let me know your favorite anime of all time down below. And if you end up enjoying tonight's story, consider liking and subscribing, but only if you genuinely enjoy these kinds of deep character explorations. Now then, lower the lights, get comfortable, and let us step inside the mind of one of anime's most unforgettable characters. To some, he is the embodiment of freedom. To others, a slave to it. Some consider him one of the greatest protagonists anime has ever created. Others believe he became humanity's greatest enemy. And perhaps the strangest part of all is that every one of them is right. Because Eren was never a simple person. He was not someone the world shaped into a monster. Something dangerous already existed inside him, long before the world gave it a reason to awaken. Even as a child, there was something deeply unnatural about the intensity with which Eren viewed freedom. Most people desire freedom. Eren needed it, and whenever he felt that freedom being stolen, whether from himself or from someone else, there was already evidence of what he truly was. Most children learn violence through fear, hatred, or survival. Eren did not. For him, violence appeared instinctive whenever freedom was threatened. And nowhere was that more visible than the day he met Mikasa. To most people, that moment was simply the story of a boy rescuing a frightened girl. Violence came frighteningly naturally to him, not learned, not taught, natural. That is what made Eren different from the very beginning. The Titans did not create the darkness inside him. The world merely gave a direction to it. Long before Eren understood the world, before the Titans, before the walls fell. But that is not what truly happened. What happened that day revealed something deeply unsettling about Eren's nature. When Eren learned that Mikasa had been taken by traffickers, he did not hesitate. He did not panic. He did not freeze. He made a decision, and then he acted on it with a level of calmness no child should have possessed. Even before entering the cabin where the men were hiding, Eren already understood what he was about to do. Not scare them, not stop them, kill them. And the most disturbing part is how coldly he accepted that conclusion. Inside the cabin, Eren stabbed one of the men without hesitation. Then another. Not wildly, not emotionally, directly, efficiently. As though violence became effortless the moment he believed someone's freedom had been stolen. Even Mikasa, while watching him covered in blood, realized something terrifying in that moment. Eren was not behaving like an ordinary child. There was something frighteningly uncompromising inside him, something that refused to tolerate cages of any kind. And when the final man grabbed Eren and nearly killed him, it was Eren's words that awakened something inside Mikasa herself. Thathakai. Thathakai. That was the word he gave her. Fight. If you want to live. And from that moment onward, the bond between them became something far deeper than friendship. Because Mikasa did not simply see Eren save her that day. She witnessed the terrifying intensity with which he confronted a cruel world, an intensity that would one day shake the entire planet itself. From the very beginning, Eren viewed the world in a way most people never could. To ordinary people, the walls represented safety. To Eren, they represented humiliation. Even as a child, he could not understand how humanity had accepted living inside a cage for their entire life. While others adapted to fear, Eren resented it. That resentment only grew stronger the day Armin showed him the book describing the outside world. Deserts of fire, fields of ice, vast oceans stretching farther than the eye could see. For most children, those stories would have sounded beautiful. To Eren, they sounded stolen. Because the moment he learned such places existed, he also realized something else. Humanity had abandoned its freedom long ago, and that realization filled him with rage. Not sadness, not curiosity, rage. That was the difference between Eren and everyone else. Armin dreamed about the outside world. Eren could not tolerate being denied it. Even then, freedom was not simply a desire for him. It was closer to an instinct, a force so deeply rooted inside him that the mere existence of walls felt unbearable. And perhaps that is why Eren admired the Scouts so intensely. To humanity, the Scouts looked pathetic. Broken soldiers marching toward death again and again while achieving almost nothing. But Eren saw something entirely different. He saw people refusing to submit. People willing to dedicate their hearts for the possibility of freedom. Shinzo o Sasageo, even before he fully understood those words, Eren was already living by them, because to him, there was something worse than death. Living without freedom. That was why Eren's anger toward the Titans became so absolute after the fall of Wall Maria. The Titans did not simply kill his mother. They humiliated humanity itself. They forced people to live like prey trapped behind stone, waiting helplessly for the next attack, and Eren could never accept helplessness. That hatred became the foundation of his entire existence. Not because Titans terrified him, but because they stood between him and freedom. And the terrifying thing is, throughout his entire life, whenever something stood between Eren and freedom, he destroyed it. But if Eren's obsession with freedom explained his hatred toward the Titans, it still did not explain him completely. Because there was another side to Eren that made people follow him so naturally. His refusal to surrender. Again and again, throughout his life, Eren was thrown into situations where any ordinary person would have broken. And yet, he kept moving forward. Susume, that relentless nature became one of the most defining parts of his identity. Not intelligence, not talent, not even strength, persistence. The terrifying ability to continue advancing no matter how hopeless reality became. That was the quality people around him slowly began noticing, especially during his years as a trainee. Eren was not the most gifted soldier in training. Far from it. Again and again, his emotions clouded his judgment. His anger made him reckless. His obsession with destroying Titans often blinded him to the danger surrounding him. Jon saw it immediately. To Jon, Eren looked suicidal, a person so consumed by hatred that he would throw his own life away without hesitation if it meant moving one step closer toward freedom. And, honestly, he was not entirely wrong. But even then, there was something about Eren that people could not ignore. Because no matter how many times he failed, he refused to stay down. That became painfully clear during one particular training exercise involving vertical maneuvering equipment. One after another, the trainees successfully balanced themselves in the air. Then came Eren. The moment he lifted off the ground, his body lost control almost instantly. The equipment twisted violently while he struggled desperately to stabilize himself. Again and again, he failed. Some recruits laughed quietly. Others looked at him with pity. For the first time since joining the military, Eren faced a terrifying possibility. What if determination alone was not enough? What if his hatred, his promises, his dreams of freedom were meaningless because he simply lacked the ability to reach them? But what happened next revealed something important about Eren's nature. Even humiliated, exhausted, and moments away from collapse, he still refused to quit. He demanded another attempt, then another and another, until finally, while barely maintaining balance, Eren managed to remain standing for a few moments. Long enough for the entire ground to fall silent. Only afterward did the instructors discover the truth. The equipment had been defective from the beginning. And yet, even while using broken gear, Eren had still managed to succeed. That moment perfectly captured who he was. Not a genius, not naturally superior to everyone around him. Just someone whose willpower bordered on monstrous. Someone who kept advancing long after most people would have surrendered. And perhaps that was why people slowly began gravitating toward him. Because deep down, humans admire those capable of continuing forward through hopelessness. But Eren's determination alone was not what made him dangerous. Many people are determined. Many people suffer. Many people dream about freedom. What separated Eren from everyone else was the terrifying extremity of his nature. Once Eren decided something was right, nothing could stop him anymore. Not fear, not pain, not morality. And perhaps the clearest example of that appeared during the battle for Trost. When the Titans breached the wall once again, soldiers experienced the same emotion humanity had always felt before Titans: terror, the screams, the smoke, the sight of people being devoured alive in the streets. It shattered many soldiers instantly. But for Eren, rage was the only emotion found in him the moment he saw Titans before him again, because unlike most people, Eren never viewed the Titans merely as monsters. To him, they were thieves, creatures that had stolen humanity's freedom, and that belief made his hatred toward them almost fanatical. Again and again, Eren threw himself directly into danger without hesitation, fighting with a level of recklessness that bordered on self-destruction. Even then, Mikasa understood something most people around him did not. Eren was not driven by survival. He was driven by purpose, and purpose can push human beings far beyond the limits of fear. That was why Eren continued advancing, even after watching experienced soldiers die around him. Why he kept fighting, even when the situation became hopeless. Why he could look directly into horror and still move forward. But during the chaos of Trost, Eren's recklessness finally caught up to him. After saving Armin from being devoured, Eren sacrificed himself without hesitation, throwing his own body into a Titan's mouth to pull Armin to safety. And in that moment, the boy who swore to destroy every Titan seemingly died before accomplishing any of his dreams. But even that moment revealed something important about him. Because Eren did not hesitate, not even for a second. Most people cling desperately to life when faced with death. Eren abandoned his own life instantly if it meant protecting something he cared about. And perhaps that contradiction was always part of what made him so compelling. Beneath all his rage, violence, and obsession, there was still humanity inside him. A humanity that desperately wanted freedom not only for himself, but for the people he loved. And yet, that same humanity would eventually become the very thing leading him toward unimaginable destruction. But perhaps the most important moment in understanding Eren came after his death. Because when Eren emerged from the body of a Titan during the Battle of Trost, the entire meaning of his existence changed. Until that moment, humanity believed Titans and humans existed as complete opposites. One devoured, the other survived. But Eren shattered that understanding instantly. When Eren first learned the truth, that he himself possessed the power of a Titan, the revelation shattered him. For years, Titans had represented everything he despised. They were the creatures that stole freedom, the creatures that devoured his mother, the creatures he swore to exterminate with his own hands. And now, that same darkness existed inside him. For perhaps the first time in his life, Eren was forced to confront the possibility that the monster he hated most already existed within him. What if the line separating humans from monsters had never truly existed at all? The realization horrified him, not because he feared death, but because he feared losing himself. Because becoming the very thing he hated felt like a cruel distortion of everything he had fought for. And yet, despite that horror, Eren still chose to use the power, again and again, because in the end, Eren feared powerlessness more than monstrosity. As long as becoming a Titan allowed him to continue moving toward freedom, he accepted the burden that came with it. But power alone was never what truly changed Eren. The real transformation began when he discovered the truth about the world beyond the walls. Because as a child, Eren imagined the outside world as freedom itself, an untouched world waiting beyond the cruelty of the Titans, a place where humanity could finally breathe without fear. That dream was what kept him moving forward for years. But when Eren finally reached the sea, something unexpected happened. While everyone around him stood in awe of the ocean they had dreamed about since childhood, Eren looked beyond it, toward the enemy waiting on the other side. That moment revealed something tragic about him. For Armin, the ocean represented freedom. For Eren, freedom remained distant even after reaching it, because Eren's idea of freedom had already evolved into something impossible. As long as another wall existed before him, whether stone, titans, nations, or humanity itself, he could never truly feel free. And that was the moment his dream began transforming into something far darker. Because Eren finally realized the Titans were never the true enemy. Human beings were. The outside world hated the people of Paradis long before Eren ever touched the sea. To them, his people were monsters, devils, born only to be feared and exterminated. And for perhaps the first time since childhood, Eren encountered something he could not destroy through sheer determination alone. An entire world. A world that would never willingly allow him or the people he loved to live freely. That realization changed him permanently. The anger inside Eren became quieter after that. Not weaker. Quieter. More controlled. More distant. More dangerous. Because the reckless boy who once charged blindly toward every obstacle slowly began disappearing, and in his place, something colder emerged. Someone capable of carrying unbearable pain in silence if it meant continuing toward his goal. That was the version of Eren that frightened people the most. Not the angry child screaming about revenge, but the calm young man who had already accepted what he was willing to become for freedom. And from that point onward, every step Eren took moved him closer toward a fate that would forever blur the line between hero and monster. By the time Eren returned to Paradis after infiltrating Marley, the person he once was had already begun disappearing. The change was visible in his eyes long before anyone understood his plan. The anger was still there, but now it existed beneath silence. Controlled, buried, heavy, and perhaps that was what disturbed the people closest to him the most. Because Eren no longer looked like someone searching for another path. He looked like someone who had already accepted the path ahead of him, even if it meant burning the world down for the people he cared. And perhaps the cruelest moment of Eren's life had arrived long before anyone realized. Not on a battlefield, not beneath the walls, not surrounded by titans. But during a simple touch of the hand, the moment Historia touched Eren, he saw fragments of the future waiting ahead of him. And from that point onward, something inside him changed, because Eren was no longer simply fighting toward freedom. He was now moving toward a future he already knew was coming. A future filled with death, destruction, and himself standing at the center of it all. That was the burden Eren carried in silence during the final years of his life. The knowledge that the path ahead horrified him, and yet he continued walking it anyway. That was the tragedy of Eren Yeager. For most of his life, he fought against cages, against walls, against titans, against fear. But the further Eren moved toward freedom, the more trapped he himself became. Trapped by memory, by destiny, by the future he had already seen. And slowly, the boy who once dreamed about freedom beyond the walls began understanding something cruel. Freedom was no longer innocent, not after learning the truth about the world, because beyond the sea did not exist freedom. Only more hatred, more violence, more walls. And once Eren realized that, his view of the world changed forever. The outside world did not see the people of Paradis as human beings, only devils. An entire nation condemned for sins committed long before they were born. Children hated before they could even speak, feared before they could even understand why. And to Eren, That reality felt unbearable, because from his perspective, the world had already decided his people deserved to die, before they were even given the chance to live freely. That realization slowly pushed Eren toward one of the darkest conclusions imaginable. If the outside world would never stop trying to destroy Paradis, then perhaps the outside world itself had to disappear. And the horrifying part is, Eren understood exactly how monstrous that thought was. He was not blind, not manipulated, not incapable of understanding morality. Eren knew the horror of what he was becoming long before anyone else did, but he continued moving forward anyway. Tatakei. Because in Eren's mind, there was only one thing more unbearable than becoming a monster, allowing the people he loved to be destroyed while he stood powerless to stop it. And perhaps that is the reason Eren continues to divide people so deeply even now, because the closer one looks at him, the harder he becomes to judge. On one hand, Eren became responsible for unimaginable destruction. Millions of innocent lives erased beneath the footsteps of the rumbling. Children, families, entire civilizations. The scale of it was so horrific that many could no longer see him as human at all, only a monster. And yet, reducing Eren to nothing more than evil feels strangely incomplete. Because unlike many villains, Eren never hid behind excuses. He understood the weight of what he was doing. He understood the suffering he would cause. And perhaps most painfully of all, he understood that the people beyond the sea were human beings exactly like himself. That realization did not stop him, but it did torment him, which is what makes Eren's tragedy so different from simple cruelty. A cruel people destroy others without remorse. Eren destroyed the world while carrying the full emotional burden of what he was doing, and that burden slowly crushed him from within. The clearest example of this appeared during his encounter with Ramsay, a frightened child from the outside world, a boy completely innocent of the hatred surrounding him. And yet Eren saved him from violence in the streets of Marley. Something inside him began breaking apart. Because Eren already knew what would eventually happen. He already knew that one day, the rumbling would crush this same child beneath countless footsteps. And despite knowing that future, he still saved him. That contradiction reveals everything about Eren's nature. Even at his darkest, there were still fragments of humanity inside him that could not ignore suffering standing directly before his eyes. Those same fragments of humanity were not enough to stop what he believed had to be done. That is why Eren became such a haunting character, because he was neither fully monster nor fully hero. He existed somewhere in between. A person capable of love, compassion, and selflessness, while simultaneously becoming the cause of unimaginable destruction. And perhaps that contradiction was inevitable from the very beginning, because Eren's greatest strength and greatest flaw were always the same thing. Once he moved forward toward freedom, he could never force himself to stop. And in the end, perhaps the cruelest part of Eren's story was this. Despite spending his entire life chasing freedom, he never truly felt free himself. From the moment he kissed Historia's hand, Eren became trapped between future and present. Every step he took carried the weight of memories that had not yet happened. Every smile from his friends, every quiet moment beside them, every sunset beyond the walls, slowly transformed into something painful. Because Eren already knew those moments could not last. And that knowledge isolated him long before he physically separated himself from the others. The distance people noticed in him during his final years was not coldness alone. It was loneliness, a loneliness created by carrying a future nobody else around him could fully understand. Even Armin, the person who understood Eren better than anyone, could no longer completely reach him. And Mikasa. Perhaps no one suffered more from Eren's transformation than Mikasa, because she continued loving the same boy she had loved since childhood, even while watching him slowly disappear before her eyes. That was the tragedy hidden beneath Eren's cruelty. The more he moved toward his goal, the more he isolated himself. from the people he cared about most. And yet, despite everything, part of Eren still desperately wished for another answer. That contradiction appears constantly throughout the final stage of his life. A part of him wanted freedom at any cost. Another part wanted someone to stop him before he crossed the line completely. And perhaps that internal conflict is what makes Eren feel so painfully human, despite everything he became. Because beneath all the destruction, beneath the rumbling, beneath the monster, the world came to fear. There was still a broken boy unable to escape his own nature. A boy who wanted the people he loved to live long, peaceful lives. A boy who wanted to reach freedom with Armin beyond the walls. A boy who wrapped a scarf around Mikasa and gave warmth to someone who had lost everything. But there was another side to him as well. The side that could never accept cages, never accept submission, never accept powerlessness. And eventually, that side became stronger than everything else. That is why Eren Yeager became unforgettable. Not because he was perfect, not because he was righteous, but because he embodied one of the most terrifying contradictions imaginable. A person capable of immense love and immense destruction at the exact same time. So who was Eren Yeager? Truly a hero? To many people, yes. He gave humanity hope when the world stood on the edge of extinction. He fought when others surrendered. He carried burdens that would have broken most people long before adulthood. He moved forward no matter the pain, no matter the fear, no matter what it cost him. But calling Eren a hero alone ignores another truth. Because heroes are usually remembered for saving the world, Eren chose to destroy it. Was he a monster then? Perhaps. But even that word feels incomplete, because monsters are often portrayed as creatures empty of empathy, empty of guilt, empty of love. Eren was none of those things. Even at the height of the rumbling, Eren understood the horror of his actions. He knew innocent people would die. He knew children beyond the sea feared death just as much as the children inside the walls once had. And yet, he continued moving forward anyway, not because he enjoyed destruction, but because deep within him, the desire for freedom had grown stronger than everything else, stronger than morality, stronger than fear, perhaps even stronger than love itself. That was Eren's tragedy. The very thing that made him inspiring was also the thing that destroyed him. His refusal to surrender, his refusal to accept cages, his refusal to remain powerless. Those qualities made people admire him. But those same qualities also pushed him toward catastrophe once the world itself became the wall standing before him. And perhaps that is why Eren continues to resonate so deeply with people, because beneath the titans, the wars, and the destruction, his story was painfully human. The desire to be free, the fear of helplessness, the anger toward a cruel world, the desperation to protect the people one loves, those emotions exist inside almost everyone. Eren simply carried them to their absolute extreme. That is what made him fascinating and terrifying. Because Eren Yeager was never simply a hero or a villain. He was a human being whose hunger for freedom became so absolute that it eventually consumed everything around him, including himself. And perhaps that is why, years after his story ended, people still cannot forget him. Because Eren did not merely fight against the world, he forced the world to confront one uncomfortable question. How far can a human being go before the pursuit of freedom transforms them into the very thing they once hated? And perhaps the most haunting part of Eren's story is that, in the end, he achieved the very thing he had always desired: freedom. Not the freedom of the outside world, not the freedom beyond the sea, but freedom from the future that had been crushing him for years. Because throughout the final stage of his life, Eren existed as someone constantly moving toward an ending he already understood. Every conversation carried hidden grief behind it. Every moment beside his friends slowly became a goodbye. And yet, he continued forward anyway, That fight, that word followed Eren throughout his entire life. At first, it was the cry of an angry child refusing to submit to cruelty. Later, it became the philosophy of someone willing to sacrifice everything for freedom. But by the end, the hake had become something tragic, a command Eren could no longer escape even within his own mind. Because perhaps no one was a greater prisoner of Eren's nature than Eren himself. That is the contradiction at the center of his character. The boy who hated cages more than anyone ultimately became trapped by his own relentless pursuit of freedom. And still, despite all the destruction, despite all the suffering, despite becoming the enemy of the entire world, there remained something undeniably human about him until the very end. Not in the rumbling, not in the violence, but in the quiet moments hidden beneath it all. His desire for his friends to live long lives, his fear of being forgotten by Mikasa, his childish jealousy, his grief, his tears. Those moments mattered because they revealed that beneath the myth, beneath the monster, beneath the symbol Eren eventually became, there was still a deeply flawed human being struggling against himself. And perhaps that is why his story feels so unforgettable. Not because he was perfect, but because he felt painfully real. A person capable of incredible love and horrifying destruction. Someone strong enough to challenge the world itself, yet too weak to escape his own nature. So this is who Eren Yeager truly was. Not a saint, not a devil, not merely a hero or a monster, but a boy born with a hunger for freedom so absolute that it eventually consumed the world itself.